honeysuckle, a great big expression of happiness. Boy, you couldn't miss. With a dozen roses, such would astound you. The joy of children laughing around you. These are the makings of you. It is true, the makings of you.
All right, I got here my cousin, my old running buddy. Grew up together, went through a whole lot of incidents, but we grew up together, and we have a very special relationship because of that. Vicky, she was known as Vicky, but her name is Georgiana, which she always hated.
That's right.
So for this purpose, we're going to call her Vicky. And Vicky, we just want you to tell us about your dad and your mom, little reflections, strengths that you got from them, things that you observed them about them, and take it from there.
Okay. Well, my father was George Myers Jr., and he died when I was 16 years old in 1958. He had 9 children. My mother and father migrated from the South in 1938. My mother was left in the South, and she was pregnant at the time with my older sister, and my father and my uncle came to New York for a better life. Even though my father worked for the WPA when he was 12 years old in South Carolina, then he worked for the railroad down there, but he wanted a better life and he migrated to New York. And they got an apartment on 128th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue, him and Johnny Williams. And when my sister was born, my mother said that she was born dead, but she had a long head, and the midwife put her near the fireplace and said they was getting her prepared to bury her. But my grandmother, Mary Ellen Williams, kept looking at the baby and thinking that the baby was not really dead, and she started patting my sister on her head, and the head went down, and eventually Blondell cried. So she was alive, because my mother thought, oh my God, I'm down here in South Carolina, Georgia, and New York. What's he going to think? I lost the baby. The baby was born dead. But she survived, and she was born November the 3rd, 1939. So after Blondell was born, my mother came to New York. By that time, Johnny Williams and my father had gotten an apartment, and they was working at Paradise Bowling Alley in Harlem. And eventually, when my mother came up, they set up the pins for the bowling alley. Yeah, everything's electronic now, but back in those days, people set them pins up, and that was my father's job.
And they had to jump up into a little thing where the ball came.
That's right.
Sometimes the pins would fly.
You got it, yes. Eventually, that my aunts started migrating to New York also, and my father said the apartment got too small because he couldn't live with Sarah and Risa Bell. So he eventually got a superintendent's job. And I don't know if Perry Mize must have came up there, I think, with Johnny Williams and my father, but I'm not so sure about that. But eventually his brothers came up there, and his sisters were still in the South at this time. My father lived on 117th Street in Harlem in 1941 when I was born in Harlem Hospital. And eventually they moved on Kelly Street, and they moved in the Bronx and around New York for quite some years. As a child, you know, I always thought we're superintendents. I didn't like that idea too much. Now that I've gotten older, they had the best of both worlds. They got rent-free, electric-free, telephone-free, and they had a job, so they were living good. You know, there was people in our neighborhood used to say that my father was rich, and I didn't believe it, but he had a good job and a good life. But
the other job that he had was in addition to municipal. That was
the railroad.
Which railroad was that?
Pennsylvania Railroad. He worked there for 16 years. He went to work for the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1941 when I was born, and he was there when he passed. At that time in the 40s, a lot of our aunts and uncles worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. Coon Myers was down there, and Annie Vanner, and bunk. The ladies cleaned the Pullman cars as they came into 30th Street Station on long trips, and the men worked as trackmen. The women eventually stopped working, and the men did too, but my father stuck with the Pennsylvania Railroad until he died.
What's the thing you remember most about your dad?
He was mean, hardworking, and one of the nicest human beings you would ever come across. A lot of people were afraid of my father, but if they really knew my father, he was a nice person that always helped his family. If the family ever needed anything or wanted something, they would go to George Myers. George Myers would take care of it. His best friend in life was Perry Myers, because him and Perry was like two peas in a pod. You seen George, you seen Perry. They worked together and they lived a good life. We lived around the corner from each other. Perry and Daddy was jack of all trades and master of none. But they did carpenter work, plumbing work, electrician work. They did everything. They knew how to be men. They took care of their families and they were good men. My father trained my brother to do a lot of the work that he knew how to do. My brother could paint. I remember Perry Myers coming to our house on 184th Street and paint one of the prettiest designs on our walls. People would walk down the hill and look down and see, and they would come and say, "Where did you get this wallpaper?" We said, "No, my uncle painted that."
He used to call it glamorizing.
That's right.
Yeah,
it was good.
Paintbrush, I remember. And he would twirl it in a certain way.
And towels.
Yeah. Now, tell me about your mom. What do you remember about your mom?
I thought my mother was the sweetest person in the world. And I know a lot of people think their mother is the sweetest person in the world, but my mother was kind-hearted and considerate. If she couldn't help you, she would never hurt you. My mother was kind almost to a fault. She loved her children, and to a certain extent, she overly was kind. You know what I'm saying? That sometimes she was taken advantage of. People used to move in on my mother just off the street. We got away from the homeless people because homeless people used to end up at my mother's house. Now, when I came from Germany in '64, there was one sleeping on the floor in the dining room. I said, "Who is this?" "Oh, she just came by one day and never left." They had people come in and move in with my mother, and my mother took care of them. And the people that migrated from the South in the 60s, I mean, even before, even in the 50s, we had people that migrated from the South, because they had Lug lived with us at one time, John Ernest lived with us. Everybody that came out of Roseville would come, and my mother and father would give them a place to live, get them a job, and start them on their way, and then they was able to survive in New York. My mother did that on Dawson Street after my father died. There was people, I ran a couple of them home. I said, "Don't you live someplace? You don't live here." And Joe was one of Frankie's friends. He would always come there. His mother was an alcoholic, but my mother took him in. And I ran him home one day, and he come back the next.
Tell a story about something. Your father, I remember, was very protective of you young girls.
Oh, he didn't allow boys around us at all. He thought that was a no-no. I was 16. I wasn't allowed to date. Date who? You better sneak and do it, because Daddy didn't play that. My sister was 18, and it wasn't until I think he caught us smoking one time in the basement, and he said, "Well, you're smoking, I guess you got a boyfriend too." He told us what kind of man could come to his house. He said he don't want nobody coming there that had a suit and a tie on at all times, because you got to put work clothes on at some time. He said don't get no person from Harlem, because they was all slicksters and they were no good.
So
he said
Frankie
definitely don't bring nobody with a process.
Frankie Lyman couldn't come back.
No, he had a process too. No way. If they had a process, no. First thing my father would ask you, "Do you have a job?" Because if you didn't have a job, you couldn't come and date us anyway. He gave Blondell permission to have a boyfriend, and lucky that the boy came to visit when my father had a couple of drinks, because if he was sober, he probably would have put him out. I remember when Cookie was born, And we knew that Mama was in the hospital and she wouldn't be home for a couple of days. So we told everybody in school we was having a party. Because Daddy worked on the Pennsylvania Railroad at 9:30 at night. We gonna have this party. Daddy gets on the phone that morning after Cookie's born and said he wasn't going to work, which that was hard. He always went to work. So we had to call everybody up and tell them not to come to our house because my father didn't go to work. We got in touch with everybody but Bill Cupperson, who was my boyfriend, and he ended up coming down the stairs. And by the family room being, as soon as you come down the steps, he couldn't turn around and leave. My father seen him. So he asked him, who did he come and see? Well, he said, Vicky. That was the wrong thing to start anyway. Vicky who? I don't know no goddamn Vicky. But he said, Georgiana. I said, he's here for me. And we went in the living room, and me, Blondell, and Frankie, and Claudia, and Mary, all of us was in there just sitting down talking to Bill. No problem, right? My father came there and asked him what his name was, who his mother was, who his father was, and he said, we thought he was getting along fine with Bill, but he looked up at the clock and he said, you see it's 9:30? And I want you out of my goddamn house and don't come back no more. That's how my father was. He didn't like us to have boyfriend, and don't let him go to Bill Myers' house and then come back to our house, and he swear we had as much boyfriend as Bill girls did, and he'd take it out on us. Yeah,
okay, what do you think you got from your dad and your mom that just carried you through the things that you had to, obstacles you had to?
They taught us values, and my father instilled in us the fact that you have to work to get what you want in life. My father kept 2 jobs most of his life, and he told us that in order to get anything in life, you have to work. And we all, I think, follow that rule. The majority of us, we keep jobs, yes.
Yeah. Well, Vicky, that's been great. And like I said, from a personal point of view, I can readily attest to some of the things you were told. And I do have the image of your dad and mom, 2 very special people. And I want to thank you. If it's going to be recorded, this is recorded. That work ethic thing you pointed out, I like that. So.
The righteous way to go, little one would know or believe if I told them so. You're second to none, the love of all mankind should reflect some sign of these words I've tried to recite. They are close but not quite, almost impossible to do, reciting the makings of you. Thank you.